The women's national team scored early but fell late to Brazil in a friendly. We learn what's cooking in Seattle soccer and MLS breaking news, big trades and moves in Major League Soccer. That and more on Wednesday's Morning Kick Around. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Morning Kick Around, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's favoritist country. This is your favorite show, live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. David Peckham crowed us in, so you know you're tuned in. Jason, how you feeling this morning? I feel like I had to self-relegate myself. I've told this to you before. I'm a regular pickup soccer player. In the spirit of American soccer, I think I need to self-relegate. I considered myself once a inconsistent player, but I think I need to relegate myself just down to bad player.
Oh no, the way you said it the first time was a tautology, right? You want to self-relegate yourself? I don't think you have to say the second self, but you got to. Yeah, I'm sorry for your decline, Robert. Time comes for us all. Time is undefeated.
I've considered myself like a recreational John Joe Shelby sort of level player.
All right. You
know, mostly crap, but can do something amazing every now and again. But I was reflecting that the amazing things hadn't come in quite some time. But we got some great stuff on the show today. Breaking news: one of the league leaders added some quality, and a global superstar might be added to the record breakers. So we'll get into that. We're gonna have a great conversation about Seattle soccer with Jeremiah Oshan. And maybe dust off some plans for America's original plan for promotion and relegation. So lots of stuff coming up on the program.
I love history. I'm a big history guy. So in fact, I wrote about history on my newsletter today, which you can find on my link tree, which is, I think, on my bio on Blue Sky. You got to look for me, Davis Jason on Blue Sky, and then you'll find stuff to click on. And you can read me talking about American soccer history a little bit today in a post I just dropped. And we're going to dive into the pro rel history. Yeah, let's do that. Why not dream a little bit, Robert? What if we had a time machine? And what if we could go back in time and do this whole thing over again? What would that look like?
We'll see. We'll see that coming up later in the program. But before we dig in, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it so already. We are creeping up on 2,000 subscribers, so be the next to do so. Tell your friends to then do so after that. Morning Kick Around on YouTube.com. You can also hit the thanks button there or donate some to the show and get some stickers and a couple different things you can do to support the show within YouTube. You can also look over at coffee.com/morningkickaround, where we have bonus segments for those who donate, and you can donate as little as $5 one time, or something bigger of your own choosing, or something regularly scheduled. You can also follow the show on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and the Blue Sky. And you can also write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And one more thing.
Yeah.
You like podcasts? You
I
can
do.
look up. You like a podcast? I know some
I do.
people like a good podcast. During COVID, I think I was in like the top 5 podcast listeners on Spotify. A lot of audio content. Well, anyway, look us up, Morning Kick Around, on your favorite audio platform to take us on the road in podcast format. We'll get there. All right, let's get into it. Not Mondays, but Wednesdays, long balls. It's been a busy week. Wednesday's long balls coming up here on Morning Kick Around. Let's do it. Long balls here on Wednesday, April 9th. I'm Robert. He's Jason. As we're preparing the show, breaking news. First place Columbus Crew acquire attacking midfielder Daniel Gazdag from Philadelphia Union in a cash trade. So the Columbus side that produced tons of great soccer lost one of their biggest contributors in Cucho Hernandez. they're still in first place without him, and now they've added Gazdag from Philly, further stripping of Philly's talent pool, and the rich getting richer a little bit in the Eastern Conference.
Yes, this is another example of that cash for trades market that Major League Soccer created before the season. I'll try to remember. I think it's Joveljic to Kansas City. It is Quinn Sullivan to McGlynn to Houston, not Quinn Sullivan. The other one, McGlynn to Houston. What else do we have in terms of cash for trades?
Was Acosta cash for trade?
Lucho Acosta leaving Cincinnati and going to Dallas, and then obviously you had Evander going from Portland to Cincy, and then, yes, those two as well. And now this is another one, and this is a bombshell because I don't think anybody saw it coming. Now, if you think about the timing, we are a couple of weeks away from the close of the primary transfer window in Major League Soccer, which is a factor, right? The teams need to get business done if they want to do business. I caught this over on Blue Sky from Matthew DeGeorge, who has covered the Union in the past, and he says that the blueprint here is for Ernst Tanner is the fact that Gazdag's going into the final option year of his contract. So the Union will lose control of Gazdag unless he signs a new deal. He's 29 years old. Ernst Tanner famously loves the young guys, wants to bring more of that Philly talent through the system and put them into the first team. And this is a thing that's going to facilitate more minutes for younger players. It's going to make them worse. Daniel Gazdag has been an MVP candidate in Major League Soccer. And here you're now pushing him out the door, sending him on, whatever you're getting back, sending him on to Columbus. And yeah, I just think it's interesting the different philosophies at play here. That you've got Columbus who's basically saying, we're going for it. We're going to go try to win another championship. We think we got the best coach in the league. And yeah, we had to trade Cucho because an offer we could not refuse came in from a Spanish club. But we think we can still win this. We're good enough right now. And here we are with one of the best chance creators in Major League Soccer now. Whatever they're paying, again, that matters. But I don't think they're paying out the nose for 29-year-old Daniel Gazdag. And with the way that Ilford Nancy plays, man, I think Gazdag is perfectly suited to thrive. Will he be as much of a goal threat as Cucho was in their system? I don't know. We'll see. But he can be a chance creator. He can find space and set up his teammates. Man, this could really hum for the Columbus Crew. And I know Philly fans are probably like, what the hell, bro? Like, what's happening here?
H-E-double hockey sticks going out there for sure.
This is the thing for Ernst Tanner. The sell is, I know what I'm doing. Take a look at the standings. Every move I've made that you didn't like number one, fire Jim Curtin, has worked out because we are in the thick of this thing. We're on 13 points from 7 games. I believe our man, Ernst Tanner, your man, Philadelphia, I believe he just did an interview with Backheeled not that long ago in which he said, hey, look, I got it right. Now, it's only 7 games, so maybe Ernst needs to slow his roll a little bit. But that's his belief.
Hold up. You hold up on that one.
He believes that he got it right, and I think this is yet another example of that overarching philosophy coming to bear. And I like Bradley Cornell. I've had a chance to talk to the man on the radio. He is a very likable guy. He obviously brings a particular philosophy to the table, which is what Ernst Tanner wanted. But the reason he's there and Jim Curtin is not is because Bradley Cornell will say, okay, yes, Ernst, let's do that. Fine, yes, absolutely, Ernst. What can I do for you, Ernst? I'm not saying he's a yes man, but he was hired to follow Ernst's lead rather than the other way around with Jim Curtin. So a fascinating moment for Major League Soccer for Cincinnati for Columbus and Philadelphia. Columbus.
For context, Daniel Gazdag has been on the Union since 2021, and his goal and assist contributions can't be taken lightly. So far in the 6 games in 2025, he had 2 goals and 2 assists, and then had 19 and 8 in 24, and then 22 goals and 6 assists in 23, and then 24 goals and 6 assists in 22. So he's got over 70 goals in the last 4 seasons. So a huge goal output, and I'm not quite sure how that is replaced very quickly by Philadelphia. But Columbus, they lose Cucho. They're already doing well in first place in the Eastern Conference. Does this just add depth, or does Columbus go to a whole nother level, like right off the bat with the Gazdag?
Well, they go to another level from where they were this season after having sold Cucho, right? They were a very good team. They sold their MVP guy, and you thought, oh, they're going to take a step back. And, okay, they started the season, they haven't been unstoppable all year long. I'm looking at the season so far, right? They beat Chicago on opening day. They went to New England and won. Neither one of those wins is too impressive right now. They got bounced from the Champions Cup by LAFC, ultimately over two legs, of course. They drew with Houston. They drew with San Diego, which actually looks pretty good right now, drawing with San Diego. They drew with NYCFC, and the last two games have been wins over DC and Montreal. Again, not teams that you put on your resume and say, look at what we did. So I think there's still room for improvement. The tougher part of their schedule is coming. And so they have leveled up, and maybe you put them back in the same category they were before they sold Cucho. Maybe you put them as serious contenders with Miami for the top spot in the Eastern Conference.
Moving on to long ball number 2 here on Wednesday, April 9th. It came to light yesterday that a little old team called Inter Miami has the discovery rights for a player known globally as KDB. Kevin De Bruyne said last week he is moving on from Manchester City, which led to speculation of where he would go. There was thoughts he might go to San Diego, and San Diego said not interested. So then who has the discovery rights? And it comes to pass that Inter Miami has rights to Kevin De Bruyne. So with the already stacked lineup down in South Beach, it leads the question, if this comes to pass, if Kevin De Bruyne moves from Manchester City and joins the likes of Messi, Suarez, Busquets, Alba, is this kind of cheating, and is this manipulation beyond the pale for Major League Soccer and its rules and the fluid nature of them?
I've been fascinated by the emotional response to this news from MLS fans, or the small sample of MLS fans that I've been able to connect with and see their thoughts on social media and the like. I mean, I get it. Like, the immediate thing is, oh, this is not fair. How can Inter Miami, who already has this incredible collection of talent, add a player like Kevin De Bruyne, who's one of the most accomplished midfielders of his generation? That doesn't seem right. But what fails to take into account is that Kevin De Bruyne gets to choose. If Kevin De Bruyne wants to sell his services, at least for the time being, for this season, because Inter Miami does not have an open DP slot in 2025, if he wants to sell his services on the cheap, on the future promise of something, who's to say that that's wrong? I guess the idea is like, oh, Miami shouldn't promise him something next year or in order to get him to sign a contract now. But that stuff is done kind of all the time. And honestly, that's a level of trust that maybe I don't know that Kevin De Bruyne should put into Miami, and maybe that's part of this for some people. And I'm sure that the rest of the league's CSOs and general managers and technical directors and sporting directors would be upset to see Miami add a player like that when it seems unfair. But that club has shown ambition, right? They've brought in players who are attractive to play with. Kevin De Bruyne gets to play with Lionel Messi. Maybe he never thought that would happen in his life. And if he says, oh, I'll take a TAM deal to play with Lionel Messi, well, then go get yourself a Lionel Messi so your team is as attractive as Inter Miami so you can bring in players like Kevin De Bruyne on TAM deals. I mean, I don't know. Right? Was it cheating when Zlatan Ibrahimovic signed a TAM deal with the Galaxy when he arrived? Maybe it was. Maybe it feels like cheating, but I'm just not sure that the rules necessarily say it is. Now, the discovery rights thing, that's got people twisted up too, Rob, because it's always been
people forget. People forget about those things.
How can you discover a KDB? And remember that this is first right of refusal, first opportunity to negotiate, and it's supposed to level the playing field by giving clubs that are not Miami, that don't have the geographic advantage that Miami has, the opportunity to go after players, and obviously to limit interleague battles for signings, right? What MLS doesn't want is a bidding war for Kevin De Bruyne between multiple MLS teams. What they want to be able to do is say, all right, only one team can negotiate with him. Now, if you want Kevin De Bruyne, you're going to have to trade for his discovery rights, right? This is actually fair, I think. Andrew saying it needs to be renamed, just call it dibs. Just call it dibs. We all know what that is.
So what's the figurative version of putting a folding chair in the spot that you call dibs on for a
Right.
player? Like, do you just
Exactly.
put like a folding chair near his house or something?
It probably evokes the wrong image, but call shotgun. I got shotgun. I mean, just you got shotgun on Kevin De Bruyne? Fine. You got shotgun on Kevin De Bruyne. Now, I don't remember, so I do kind of remember, but I'm not specific about the details on how this works. I think you get to put 3 names on a list at the beginning of the year or something. And teams have to calculate how likely it is that player will become available. So it's kind of like, well, if I put Kevin De Bruyne on my list, if I'm the, I don't know, if I'm RSL. Now, RSL would put Kevin De Bruyne's name on a list knowing that the chances that he would sign with them are very, very slim, right? Almost infinitesimal to imagine that Kevin De Bruyne would, after leaving Manchester City, would go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go play in Salt Lake City. That's what I'm going to do. I mean, no offense to Salt Lake City. It's just not the same kind of attraction for a European player that LA, Miami, and maybe New York are. So I just, every team has to take into account what the chances are they could get the player they're putting on the discovery list to A, maybe sign with them, or B, whether they could trade those rights. And if you're not positive that player is going to become available, why would you put his name on the list? Because then you don't have anything to trade should he decide to look at MLS, right? It only becomes an issue if a player's like, you know what, I'm only going to play for X team in Major League Soccer. And that team doesn't have the rights, and DC United or Columbus or RSL or someplace where he wasn't going to sign goes, well, you have to trade with us and we get some stuff for that. I mean, again, I think it's dumb, but it is the way of MLS and always has been.
I keep on imagining some imaginary guy in a back room, like smoking a cigarette, got his head buried in some accounting books, like, hey, boss, I found this kid. This kid's available. This Kevin De Bruyne. We might be able to get this guy. He looks great.
Do you know about this Kevin De Bruyne guy? He's a really good player, boss. We should take a look at him.
Yeah, our scouting department has all sorts of notes on him. He seems like he might be a good addition. I have a very good friend who is a Columbus Crew supporter, and before the Gazdag news came out, he was trying to spin the yarn that maybe Kevin De Bruyne would be interested in Columbus because he's kind of a low-key, quieter person, and he could be convinced that Columbus, like if you want to come just strictly for the football and not necessarily have all the flash of where you are, like come to Columbus. But clearly that's not working. Up on the screen, Nate getting involved. Oh, that was a quick one. I'm not that fast a reader.
It's there.
Still think San Diego should be included in the list of most desirable MLS cities from a foreign player perspective. Yeah, but putting still in there is hard because, I mean, we're about like a month or two into San Diego being a possibility. But yeah, I mean, San Diego, unreal. I visited San Diego for a long weekend about 10, 15 years ago and still remember it very fondly.
You still want to sign for San Diego FC?
Yeah, sign me. I'll take a low TAM deal, guys.
I want to say that. Let me throw in my man Nicholas Murray here. Imagine the size of the fedora on that scout who's like, but that scout wouldn't say, check out this guy, Kevin De Bruyne. He'd be like, do you know about this guy, Kevin De Bruyne? What about Kevin De Bruyne, boss? And he's got the cigar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Imagination running wild. And it would be funnier knowing that sort of conversations isn't as possible considering the process that went into signing the big names in Toronto. And they did equivalent of that, but on Football Manager. Like, hey, this Insigne guy, he seems like a rootin' tootin' player. We should bring him on over to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto could be on that list of attractive destinations.
Yeah, I mean, if you know, you know. I mean, it's a global city and people internationally know it, but I don't think that necessarily hits everybody the same.
Absolutely. And obviously they've managed to attract 3 big-name Italian players, which says something about the attraction of the Italian community. There is a very strong Italian presence in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. All right, what else we got?
I guess we can move along from those thoughts on KDB. Throw it in the comments. Do you think that it is cheating to bring him in?
Do you feel like it's cheating? I definitely want to get to that. Does this feel like, if it does come to pass, is this somehow an end run around the rules for Miami, who, again, does have his discovery rights? It's not as though they are executing some deal and then, having to trade for those rights. They're the ones that put Kevin De Bruyne's name on their list. I think it's just that mismatch of the talent of Kevin De Bruyne, who's, I should also say, 33 years old, has a ton of miles on his legs, would have to adjust to life in Major League Soccer, which involves travel and surfaces and all of these kind of things that make it tougher. I'm not saying he couldn't succeed, but I do think he would have to be managed. So I'm not sure you're getting 30 games out of Kevin De Bruyne next season if you sign him, right?
Yeah,
You're not going to get that kind of output. So he will be not a part-time player, but a three-quarters part-time player, if you know what I'm saying, more than likely. And injuries are always a likelihood for a player at that age range. So, keep in mind, if you feel like, oh, this is wrong, Inter Miami adding this talent to Suarez and Messi and Alba and Busquets, and remember that Kevin De Bruyne is not exactly the player he was a couple years ago, and his value is commensurate to what he will be able to deliver. He's got a name, right? But Miami doesn't need Kevin De Bruyne's name to sell tickets. They've already got the most famous player on the planet. So for them, it's about maybe winning things. And if he is saying, I'll come and live in Miami and do it for $1.5 million, again, more power to them. We should want Major League Soccer clubs to be creative this way, to find ways to bring in the talent to push the league forward. We want ambitious clubs. I don't like this idea that we're supposed to punish Miami for being ambitious.
I think it's worth noting that a lot of the time when big DP players come from this established level, the key factors in their success is availability and attitude. I mean, if the player's in and out of the lineup all the time and obviously not having a big impact, and an attitude, are they put in the front for forward? We saw the Insigne level of commitment compared to the Bernadeschi level of commitment on Sunday night. If De Bruyne is engaged and available, you'd think he'd be a success. And before we move on, producer Jenny with a contextual note about the discovery list in general. She's put in the chat here, teams can have up to 5 players on their discovery list, no limitations on when they can be added or removed. So kind of a little bit of background on this discovery list. But moving on to long ball number 3 here for Wednesday, April 9th. United States women's national team were back in action. They concluded their back-to-back with Brazil. They score in the first minute through Catarina Macario, but eventually fall late 2-1. It should be noted that this was a much changed lineup. I think there were 7 lineup changes from the first game at the weekend. Post-game, Emma Hayes, essentially said, I put these players to the test now rather than in a bigger stage later on down the calendar.
It's exactly what this is for, right? You made a point with the 2-0 victory in the first game, with Trinity Rodman getting her first goal back. And by the way, she did not dress for last night's game because she had a knock and she's fragile at this point. I hate the fact that Trinity Rodman is as fragile as she is. I really wish that was not the case. But she is, so you got to be careful with her. You made your point in the first game. This is always the weird thing about the U.S. women's national team. They play these 2-game sets against the same side, and then we're supposed to draw out what it means when one result is different from the other result and that kind of stuff. But you look at the lineup, you look at the ages across the team. I mean, it was just youth, inexperience. I think Catarina Macario has a decent number of caps at this point, and you had Emily Sonnet anchoring the back line, 31 years old, 100-plus caps. But everybody else was on, like, single and low double-digit cap numbers. And that's cool. I mean, what other way to look at it? Because you need to do this now, 2 years out from a World Cup, to get a sense and to get these players accustomed to the level of this. Lily Johannes starting and going a half. That's obviously very good. Alyssa Thompson, who made the pass for Trinity Rodman in the first game, got the start, went 74 minutes. You had Claire Hutton, who is a 19-year-old midfielder at Kansas City. You had Corbin Albert going 58 minutes. She's starting to rack up caps. I do think there's some question about whether she's at this level, but she continues to get picked by Emma Hayes. You had a 22-year-old left back in Avery Patterson, who's brand new to this group. You had Tara McCown starting at center back. She's just now breaking into this team. So then Alana Cook, Jaden Shaw, Lindsay Heaps, still getting on the field but not starting. Samantha Coffey, we know about her, Sam Coffey, Yasmin Ryan, and of course Crystal Dunn, and Ali Setnor, who we're all very high on. So you got to look at so many players against a decent level of opposition. You still managed to keep it interesting. You scored very, very early. It would have been nice to make that stand up. And Brazil gets the winner super, super late. So you have 90 minutes of level soccer against Brazil with a very young group of players. I think this is a win despite the result.
Thinking about Emma Hayes, like communicating well about, what she was doing, what the plans were, and what the purpose of the camp and these games were, where Andonovsky was tasked with changing over from the old guard to the new. And maybe he was trying to do this, bed some players here and, test some players here, but he never really necessarily made it like crystal clear that's what he was going to do. And so it is kind of a good breath of fresh air that like, she is confident in saying like we're just trying stuff here. This is the practice for the future where you want to see the performances and the gains, whereas leadership, that Andonovsky just had like an interim period that just seemed to go on for years and years and years, trying to change the old guard to the new. Never quite worked that way. Emma Hayes comes in, wins that Olympics right off the bat, and now has this stretch, which you think that she was almost just, originally hired for, was to get this long term, this arc, get the team retooled for the next World Cup. Obviously, the Olympic win was amazing, but this was, you think, the heavy lifting that she was really hired to do. The team returns again in another, back-to-back set against the same opponent, so the same sort of dynamic is coming back. At the end of May, they play against China on May 31st and then Tuesday, June 3rd. But one thing I did also want to note was it was kind of nice to see the team play in a smaller, more appropriate venue and not necessarily like double down on the cavernous SoFi Stadium. Like they had a pretty good turnout over the weekend, but it's good to see a game, full to the rafters, stands packed. Regardless, like the facility's smaller, but it's great to see a full stadium for the national team regardless.
I mean, the thing about the women's team, despite some challenges that they faced, despite the 2023 World Cup, and obviously the gold medal kind of reinvigorated the fan base, and Emma's a big part of that. But this is a team that you look. I don't love doing this thing where we compare the U.S. women's national team to the U.S. men's national team, because what it does is create a rivalry between these two teams and the fan bases in particular. And I'm just not here for like the sniping that happens, the shot taking that happens. Not a fan of that. But I do think it's kind of interesting to point out the enthusiasm that exists for the women's team versus the men's team, and the men's team can't draw 5,000 to a game at SoFi. The women's team gets 30, and then they move up the state and they go to San Jose and they put a full house in an MLS building, which I don't know that the U.S. men's national team could do right now against. If they were
you don't
playing
think
Brazil,
that second game, I guess that third place game, you don't think they could have filled that stadium in San Jose?
No, I do not. I do not think the 18,000 people were going to show up to watch them play Canada in San Jose. I do not think, though. I don't think that's a crazy statement. I don't think it's a crazy take. I think the U.S. men's national team, the enthusiasm for that group is maybe not at an all-time low, considering nobody even knew they existed for about 15 years there in the 80s and 90s, but it's pretty low. It's pretty low it's a modern era. It's pretty low. I mean, I think if you ask, there are lots of people who drifted away from this team and have not come back. And it's definitely different constituencies and different fan bases, and there's different motivators for supporting the teams. But I think it's interesting that the U.S. women's team still they can put out, a team full of teenagers, and kind of people knew that was going to be the case, and they still draw when the men's team puts their best players on the field and nobody cares.
Have your say in the chat. Follow along and subscribe at Morning Kick Around at YouTube.com. We are climbing towards 2,000 subscribers, so help us reach that goal and move beyond. Hit the subscribe button. Tell your people if they're into YouTube shows about soccer and the developing state and landscape of the game in our country. Get them to tune in and subscribe, and let's boost those numbers up, because the more subscribers, the more comments, the richer the American soccer conversation becomes here. You can write us a note at morningkickaround@gmail.com. You can also support us with some funds at Ko-Fi. Coffee? I still say Ko-Fi. It's coffee.com/morningkickaround.
You think Ko-Fi sounds cooler than coffee, don't you? That's what it is. You just think it sounds cooler.
You know, I speak in, what was that you said at the top of the show? I speak in
Tautologies.
tautologies. So,
tautologies.
My linguisms are too advanced for this portion of the show. And speaking of coffee.com/morningkickaround, where you can donate to the show, there's also bonus content there for folks who donate. It becomes available upon any level of donation. And our next segment, Get to Know Your District. We have a segment Jason recorded with Sounder at Heart Jeremiah Oshan. We're going to talk about pro teams and pro rel in the Pacific Northwest, and we're going to show you part 1 of this interview, and the second segment will be available at coffee.com/morning.
Yeah, let me give you just before we hit this, let me tell you, it's an incredible conversation with Jeremiah Oshan, really great guy. People know Sounder at Heart. So we talk about the Pacific Northwest. We talk about the pro teams that are popping up in the Pacific Northwest, and there's a rack of them. And we talk about whether pro rel is a major driver of this. So it's a fascinating conversation. I then got a chance to ask Jeremiah about stadium plans for the Sounders, which are fascinating to talk about what the Sounders are thinking in terms of their future. If you want to see that part of the conversation, we'll put it up on the coffee page. And for just a tiny bit of money, you'll be able to watch me talk to Jeremiah Oshan about what the Sounders might be thinking with their stadium. So thank you very much for your support.
All right, let's run it. Get to know your district here on Morning Kickaround.
Jason. Jason Davis here, joined now by Jeremiah Oshan. You can find it Sounder at Heart, covering MLS and the Seattle Sounders, and maybe more importantly for our purposes, soccer in pretty much the entire Northwest. Jeremiah, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here. I've been following this new project, and I'm very excited.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, you guys have been around for so long at Sounder at Heart, going independent. I want to, credit you for keeping it going and turning that into like a self-sustaining community. As far as I know, I'm not looking at your books, but you're here with me.
It is.
Well, there you go. Okay. For anybody who might also be wondering, Jeremiah and I are not related. We are both carrying the same sort of vibe here, I think, with the beards and the gray hair and all of that. But we've been around for a while. You got a
Tacoma Stars shirt on. You're stealing my bit.
No. I put it on because you were coming on.
Perfect.
Dovetail. I've only visited the Pacific Northwest a couple of times. My sister did live out there. She lives in Boise, and we will talk about Boise. So
yeah.
Let's dive in. Okay, so Jeremiah is here because one of the obvious big stories of the late winter, early spring here in American soccer is USL. Their push towards a first division, but also obviously promotion and relegation. And because Jeremiah has such a handle on things happening in the Pacific Northwest, I saw you were posting on Blue Sky about some developments there. Jeremiah, give us a kind of a remedial landscape. I mean, obviously we know about the Sounders, we know about the Tacoma Defiance, but tell us about sort of the rest of professional soccer in the Pacific Northwest.
So as your listeners probably know, the Pacific Northwest soccer scene has been dominated by the Sounders, Timbers, and Whitecaps for ever, really. And for a time, all three of those teams were in the USL and precursors to in the A-League, or I guess they weren't all in the A-League, but whatever. They were in the USL. They have USL history, and then they all have been in MLS since 2011. And then that sort of killed the USL presence or the professional USL presence in the Pacific Northwest. And there was a brief time where those teams were fielding second teams in the USL, but that stopped, and I don't know how serious we would have considered. None of those were independent teams by any stretch of the imagination. And we now have MLS Next Pro, but it's been those three teams that have driven the pro soccer scene in the Pacific Northwest forever, essentially. And then last year, Spokane Velocity came in and this is a USL League One team, which was pretty interesting because that's the first. I believe that's other Kitsap Pumas were professional for a little while, but we don't need to get into that. That's really the first real professional team that's been in the Pacific Northwest that wasn't one of those three clubs. And what's really interesting now is, and this was even happening before the announcement of promotion and relegation, but all of a sudden this is becoming a more common thing. So we have Boise is scheduled to come online next year. They have like a 5,000 or 6,000 seat stadium out in the fairgrounds that they're getting ready to open. That's going to be expandable to 11,000. In fact, I was just reading about this. They're contractually obligated to expand to 11,000 relatively quickly. And then there's a team that's going in Eugene that used to be essentially Lane United. They're taking over for Lane United, which was a long time USL League 2 team, which was amateur. And then the latest development is that the USL has been talking to Everett, which is essentially kind of a suburb of Seattle. It's far enough north that maybe it's not technically considered a suburb, but there's going to the Aqua Sox are a minor league baseball team that play there. And so they're talking about trying to build a dual use stadium in downtown Everett and sort of create a sports entertainment district. There's also a minor league hockey team that plays there that's kind of across the street. So there's this whole, kind of like development that they're putting there. And this is going to be a League One team as well. And so all of a sudden we're going to have 4 League One teams all in USL. And then, of course, you pile on top of that promotion and relegation, and it starts to get really interesting potentially. And who knows? There's also like 7. I take it back. There's like 9 USL League 2 teams, I believe, in the Pacific Northwest right now. 7 of them are basically in the Seattle area. So it's becoming a really dense area for USL. Frankly.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, obviously, if you know the history of the Sounders and the Timbers particularly, but you throw in the Whitecaps and sort of how MLS leveraged the rivalry between those 3 clubs, Sounders and Timbers more so, hotbed comes to mind. Now, this is actually more sort of evidence of there being a hotbed, if indeed there is the demand here. And I guess, Jeremiah, that's sort of my question, the underlying demand. When we talk about expanding professional soccer in America, and I love the idea, it's always the question is, will these be self-sustaining teams? Will they be able to last? Because we've had so many teams come and go throughout history. So before we dive into sort of how USL is setting these teams up and maybe what the ambitions of these clubs will be, and maybe other amateur clubs in the area, if they see an opening to go pro, does it feel like these are truly well thought out, planned, potentially, clubs that can establish themselves in these areas and maybe grow enough of a fan base that we're not thinking in 5 years, remember the Everett, whatever they were?
I mean, I think it's a absolutely fascinating question. And I should, just before it goes out of my mind, I'll add that in Victoria has a team as well in the Canadian Premier League, and there's a Vancouver Canadian Premier League team. So that's 2 more professional teams that are playing in the Pacific Northwest. But anyway, how sustainable is all this? I bring those up because, Victoria is an example of a team that's, even though it's a small market, they seem to be drawing okay. Spokane is sort of similar, where they sort of had a stadium project that they were able to latch on to. And apparently that's an expandable facility that they have there in Spokane. Spokane is a growing city. It's out on the eastern side of Washington, well outside of really the traditional Seattle market, although, those two, and there's kind of a east-west rivalry between, that's kind of based around Washington State and the University of Washington. And so it is sort of a separate market out there. And the Boise, there's a funny story way back when the Sounders were talking about launching a second team. Boise got brought up as a possibility of where they might be able to locate it. And apparently there was a soccer community in Boise that got word of this and spammed the Sounder at Heart poll, and ended up being like the most popular poll we had ever run by many multitudes. And so I guess there's a soccer community out. I bring it up just because apparently there's a soccer community out in Boise. And so I don't know how sustainable all this is. It feels what Spokane is doing at its current level feels sustainable. At the same time, they had I saw their attendance for their last home game, I think was only like 1,900. So that's a little bit of a red flag potentially, right? But 1,900 for a lower level professional soccer league is not the worst number in the world, right? I don't know how sustainable all this is, and I think that's
Okay.
going to be that's a real question, because
Yeah.
I mean, like, the Sounders definitely suck up a lot of the attention for the men's game, especially in the Seattle area, and
Yeah.
and so the sound and I think the Timbers do the same thing in the Portland area, but I don't have a great sense of how sustainable it is, because partly because it's just relatively untested at this point. Those are
Yes.
decent sized markets. Spokane does not have any competition really for professional sports. So that's, Boise doesn't have any real competition for professional sports. So they're kind of untapped markets. And I think that is a fascinating place to be going, to say, like, can these, where I get my question is whether or not they're sustainable at the League One level. I'm willing to suspend some disbelief. But what happens when those are Division One teams? And
Well, this is the devil is in the details when it comes to Spokane, 1,900 limited stadium size, whatever it is, and if they win promotion. Now, I imagine that, and while there are some general rules around, or some guidelines on spending just because of the nature of the business, I'm sure that the thought would be, well, a team like Spokane might not spend enough to be promoted from League One, or I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here as to what kind of the market may take care of itself in a way.
It totally might. And I think that that's a totally legitimate perspective. At the same time, Spokane was in the championship game in their first year in League One last year.
Yeah.
And so we don't know how we don't know the mechanics of how promotion and relegation is going to work yet. And in fact, we're years away from potentially knowing how this settles in and all of that. But I do think that this is a real concern, that what happens when your Division One is a bunch of, put aside sustainability, what happens when half the teams in your Division One are playing in, fourth and fifth tier markets?
Yeah, I mean, that's again, this is why when we talk about what USL has decided to do, there's a level of cynicism that kind of comes naturally if you've covered the game in this country for any length of time, because it does come to, okay, how do they put together a saleable television package if they can only point to markets that, let's be honest, have 150, 200,000 people in them, right? And then again, that's great for the romantic elements of what we want in this country from a professional soccer standpoint, but it rubs up directly against the reality of running the business. And neither of us have mentioned transportation costs and all of those things in all of this. And, that's what's eats up a lot of budget. Now, when you and I were talking before we decided to do this, you mentioned like things like parachute payments and ways in which USL can soften the blow if a team goes down. Obviously, coming up is a thing, and PLS is a thing, and we kind of leave that there. But have you been able to glean anything at all from, like, again, this kind of hotbed activity in the Pacific Northwest indicates that what maybe it was always coming on some level. Maybe League One was enticing on some level to some cities and some owners and some people who have a mixed-use development plan, entertainment district plan. But do you think promotion and relegation in particular has been the impetus for more clubs to go, hey, that could be us?
That's been sort of the core question that I was trying to get at in exploring the story, because I was really trying to figure out what was happening because the story started out as what are all these USL2 teams going to do with promotion and relegation, and how many of them are changing their ambitions based on this development. And what's interesting is that not a lot of them seem to have changed. It's, they are maybe more excited about the possibility. They all are very supportive of promotion and relegation. They all seem very excited about it. But the ones that wanted to go pro sort of always had that as their guiding light. And the ones who are, more developed, more focused on development, are still more focused on development. And so they're not really planning on going pro. There are a couple other teams who are a little bit more opportunistic about this, in that they, for instance, I'll give you an example. And the big club here in this level is Ballard FC. They're drawing like 1,500 people for essentially amateur games. They play in a neighbor, essentially a neighborhood park that has some grandstands, but they're drawing, they have this exciting beer garden that they've set up. They only play 8 or 9 home games a year over the course of the summer, but they're able to get people out and people get excited about it. And they have a really nice little sustainable operation going. But you introduce promotion and relegation to this, and their minds do start going like, oh, well, maybe we can go bigger with this. Maybe we can, level up. And so, like, for instance, in Seattle, there's a stadium so Memorial Stadium is the stadium that's right in Seattle Center next to the Space Needle. And they're in the middle of renovating the stadium. And all of a sudden, that was sort of a pipe dream for a club like Ballard because it just wasn't going to be sustainable for them. But if they're, maybe if there's a pathway to promotion, that becomes a little bit more enticing and interesting. And, and so it does change the conversation some, but I don't think it has dramatically altered the course of any of these clubs yet, but who knows where it could go in the future, right?
Yeah, I think that's obviously the big question. And again, if we put the cynicism aside, is there going to be sort of a desire to interact with this? Again, some of this is what is the appetite of people to take on losses, at least initially, if we're just talking about the business of soccer. But I, again, I want to believe, if it's suspending disbelief is something you mentioned, I want to believe that we can put professional clubs, or people can launch professional clubs in all these towns that sort of have a reasonable soccer interested population, and then again connect them all together. I think some of this, Jeremiah, is like, again, we come back to the USL is a closed system. They may be talking about pro rel, but they're talking about pro rel within their league structure, which they control, and they grant the franchise rights. They wouldn't call it that. People will come into the comments and say they're not franchises like MLS teams are franchises because the owners own them. But, if it's league dependent that you launch the club, then effectively it is a franchise. So I guess that's the part that I would wonder what your thoughts are on sort of the framing of this from a USL perspective. And like, is this meant to kind of give rocket fuel to investment and expansion? And maybe that's as far as it goes right now. Or is this really or maybe both, we want to enact a system that we think not only make us unique in the marketplace, but also be something that soccer fans truly want and could be great stories for Ballard or for Boise or Ballard or whoever?
I mean, I think it's a little all of the above. I think that there is an element of differentiating themselves in the marketplace. I think that the USL is seeing challenges kind of coming to them on both sides of the ledger. On one hand, they have a ceiling that MLS has sort of set that, the USL championship as it currently is no threat to knocking off MLS as the top league in the country. And I don't know that they even look at USL Division 1, at least in the short term, as being a direct challenge to MLS. But on the other, MLS does create a ceiling for them. And then on the other hand, they're competing at even the youth level with MLS, who has MLS Next, and they have, they have their own clubs, and then MLS Next Pro is obviously effectively a direct competitor with USL League One. So I think it makes sense from a business standpoint, from a very pragmatic standpoint to me, for USL to look out into the marketplace and say, how can we differentiate ourselves from the people that have obviously way more money and are more established in a lot of ways? And that's to create this system of promotion and relegation. And if fans react to it, it could be a real game changer. But on the other hand, I do think there is some, there's another, I don't know if it's cynical or not, but I do think that it's a way of getting people in the door and saying like, hey, you can buy in at this lower level. You can buy in for relatively cheap for a League One team. And who knows, in a few years, you could have a team that is competing with some of the biggest clubs in this league who knows may end up being some of the bigger clubs in the country. So
right.
I don't think it has to be one or the other. I don't think it has to just be cynical. I don't think it just has to be pragmatic. It doesn't just have to be pie in the sky, but it can be sort of all of these things. And that's part of what I think makes it so exciting from a somewhat neutral observer is I think if you've been following the sport for as long as you and I have, you have been hearing about promotion and relegation from probably before we even really got involved in it. And it's been always this thing that's been going in the background. And I think almost all of us say, yeah, that's a fascinating experiment. We wish someone would run it without necessarily taking down the whole system with it. And this seems to be that potential. And who knows, if it works out, maybe this is, maybe this is the thing that we've all been looking for. And if it doesn't work out, I don't know that the risks are so high for American soccer. Now, are there risks for the USL and for the people who are buying in? Absolutely. But it doesn't strike me as an existential crisis for American soccer at large.
And there we go. That is Jeremiah Oshan and Jason Davis talking about soccer in the Pacific Northwest. And if you want to catch the second part of that great interview with Jeremiah, head over to coffee.com/morningkickaround. You can make a one-time donation, small, large, reoccurring, and any kind of donation will unlock that segment and others that we've put up on there.
All right. Got to pick Jeremiah's brain as I get my microphone back working. Jenny's going crazy behind the scenes. I got a chance to ask him about the stadium situation with the Sounders, because you may not know this, Rob, because I think it kind of is under the radar for people outside of the Pacific Northwest, but the Sounders are making noises about building their own stadium. And is there some danger to that idea? It's very fascinating what Jeremiah thinks could happen if the Sounders decide to move out of central Seattle and maybe go to a suburban location to get their own 30,000-seat joint or something. So, yes, coffee.com/morningkickaround to give us a little bit of cash so you can get access to that interview. Yeah, please check that out.
Also, while you're here, thank you for tuning in and hit subscribe. Help us get to the 2,000 subscriber mark. We're chugging right along, but do your thing. If you're watching, unsubscribe, just hit the button. No, it doesn't cost a penny, and it helps out the show tremendously and helps this channel grow and hit new marks, and a lot more things become available to the channel with more subscribers. So you might notice under the window there's a thanks button that only just popped up once we hit a certain plateau of subscribers. So you can hit that button and subscribe and give thanks. You can also follow us on social media at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Write us an email, morningkickaround@gmail.com. And if you prefer the podcast format, you can look up Morning Kick Around on your favorite audio platforms. We got 2 segments down and 1 to go here on Wednesday, so let's come right back with today's big question here on Morning Kick Around. Big question here for Wednesday, April 9th. One of the most compelling American soccer writers, Pablo Maurer, uncovered an interesting document and put out a well-written piece in The Athletic regarding some plans, the original plans from the 1994 World Cup bid written back in the late 80s, leading us to the question, would the original American promotion relegation plan from the 80s ever be able to get off the ground in America? Now or at any time, really.
Yeah, Rob, this is a fascinating thing. Were you ever a reader of like fantasy, sci-fi, alternate history kind of stuff? Was that ever a thing that you did?
Yeah. Yeah. I really like what's the graphic novel with the comedian and
the Watchmen.
The Watchmen, yeah. So the thing that comes to mind is the Watchmen. That's the alternate history. I like that stuff. Yeah.
Since you mentioned them, look, there's right there my copy of the Watchmen, or Watchmen. It's no D. People get mad. That stuff fascinates me. Now it's always like, and if you talk to a real historian, they'll tell you that those counterfactuals are kind of pointless. Like, counterfactuals are dumb. What are we doing here? We have no idea. You may go back and change one event, but you have no idea what would happen after that, or whether we would end up coming back to the same timeline, et cetera, et cetera. But it is fun to imagine, for us as soccer fans, what might have happened if America had instituted the pro-rail plan that you just described. Paulo Baumauer wrote about at The Athletic. He went digging in the National Soccer Archives, and he came up with something. I encourage you to go read the article if you got an Athletic subscription, because you need to see the quotes from people like Alan Rothenberg, who was one of the original architects of MLS, who was the president of U.S. Soccer just around 90-91, heading into the World Cup. You got Werner Fricker, who's passed away but was part of the story here. Sunil Gulati was around. He was involved in this, launching the idea of putting together the idea of a pro rail. This is basically Fricker wanted pro rail. He had come from Germany. He wanted to see America organized along German lines. And what's interesting about this is that he had a 3-tiered system in mind: First Division, Second Division, Third Division. Second and Third Divisions regionally organized. So I will read you some of the details here. So you would have a 32-team First Division, National First Division. Now, we're pretty close to that already, right? We got 30 MLS. I thought 30 was a lot, and maybe MLS should stop at 24, since we got one of the biggest First Divisions in the world. But apparently, Werner Fricker saw something even bigger. He thought we could add 2 to that. We could have a 32-team top division. So maybe we start there. Let's go top down. If you were to add 2 existing teams to Major League Soccer to make the First Division of Werner Fricker's dreams, what teams would those be? Because we've already done a video that got some heat around it, because we picked the USL First Division teams for 2028. Who would you add?
I think just because of the facilities they have and the success that they've had on the field, I would go Louisville would be my first pick for a promotion. Off the top of my head.
Louisville is established. They've got their own building, all those things. We're leaving PLS out of this conversation, by the way. I mean, we just kind of have to push PLS to the side. And yeah, that would be a thing. But I think Louisville's a pretty good shout. Look, just because, and again, everyone would say, you got to win your way into the First Division. But we're picking 2 teams that feel like First Division teams, so then we can institute this system along the lines of Werner Fricker. And I think stadiums matter here. I also think market size matters. Now, I'm going to pick Detroit. I know they don't have the stadium yet, but I like what they've done. Let's throw Detroit, just for our purposes. Again, You can argue with us.
For selfish reasons, I'd love that too.
We've got Louisville and we got Detroit. Now we have a 32-team First Division. And you can win a promotion into that league from a regionalized, 2 regions, Second Division of American soccer. And the way that this was imagined is, I'm sorry, I meant 4 regions. See, it's already confusing. 4 regions. I'm going to throw up a map here. This is just a general map of the United States of America. And Alaska and Hawaii get left out. Sorry about you, Alaska and Hawaii. Contiguous United States. If we had 4 regions and we needed 12 teams in each region, the way that Werner Fricker imagined this, what would our regions be? Because you got to worry about population, right? So the Northeast would be small, but have a lot of population and a lot of cities that could support teams. Then you would have the Southeast, I guess, and then you would kind of draw a line down the middle. What do you think, Rob? Like, could we get 12 teams out of the Plain states from Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, all the way to the West Coast? I don't know if we can.
Ooh, it does get thin there once you get west of the Minnesota, even really west of the Wisconsin, Illinois kind of line that goes down the middle. So are we trying to count, see if we can't count off a dozen in the Western Midwest or the Plains states? So I don't want to get in trouble with the Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska beef again, but so we have Des Moines, Omaha, Minnesota cities, an Oklahoma one. And then would you throw in Texas in those Plains states?
Yeah, I mean, look, okay, maybe the better way to do this is to think about it in terms of what already exists. And I know we've also talked about expansion, and we did an expansion video, USL expansion video, that even missed a couple of places because there's so much happening in terms of lower division soccer and then the number of potential places the league wants to expand to. I think did we miss Boise when we talked about Boise with Jeremiah Oshan. Did we miss Boise when we did our kind of recap of what projects are out there? Like I feel like maybe we did. But maybe we need to think about what already exists. And I'm working to pull up a map of the USL situation as it sits, Robert. But what do you think of? I mean, are there enough teams already existing, professional teams, maybe between both USL Championship and USL League One, that we really wouldn't have to do too much work here?
Yeah, I think where we are now, I think we're getting close to there. And if there was that carrot dangled for people who are thinking about putting plans together, I think that would accelerate them if they knew that they could get into a setup such as this. I think some people that are considering taking the plunge would push forward. But I think between the 30 teams in Major League Soccer and between the two current levels of USL, I think that it could work.
So again, going on Werner Ficker's plan, we got 32 teams now in our top division. We're just calling that MLS for our purposes. That means that we've taken Louisville and Detroit City out of the USL and moved them up into MLS. If everybody's agreeing that this is the plan, if everybody was suddenly their brains were zapped and they were like, "Yeah, let's do this," and it was all happiness in American soccer. Would we? So again, okay, in the Northeast, you got no problem. I mean, you have to even zoom in here with the insets. You got Portland, Heart of Pine. I'm not even sure who's up there in. I'm missing one up there in New Hampshire, I think. Obviously, you've got Rhode Island and Hartford, and in the New York City area, you got a couple of Westchester and Brooklyn. You've got teams in Delaware, like that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Detroit's out. 11, Fort Wayne. 12, Indianapolis. Or maybe, that's maybe your Northeast region of this second division. And then, no Louisville because you've taken them out, but Lexington. Did I include Richmond in the Northeast? I think I did, right? So Lexington, North Carolina, Charlotte, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Red Wolves, Triumph. I mean, how many we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a team that's launching, Wilmington. I think it says USL Wilmington there. I guess that's a reborn Hammerhead situation. Somebody help me out. But the Southeast looks like we can do it, right? And maybe there's a team that pops up. And that NOLA project, by the way, somebody asked us in the comments earlier today about NOLA. I don't see any movement there. So that's that maybe is out of this equation, but we can imagine a world, again, if things come together, where they can help populate the Southeast. The Southwest doesn't look too difficult. You got 3 teams in Northern California. You got 3 teams in Southern California if you include Alta, which is AV Alta or whatever that is, which is there in that inset. You've got Phoenix, you got Tucson, you got Vegas, you got Reno coming on at some point, New Mexico Locomotive. We're pretty close, right? But 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 there. There's that central Texas area, which I guess you have to throw in with the Midwest and the Northwest. I don't know. Again, maybe you just do a Western region, of course. You could just do that. But I think there might be one too many teams, or I guess New Mexico could be pushed to the central region. Robert, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think manipulation of this could probably be a fluid situation, you think, with those kind of bordering regions. But going back to the original big question of this segment, could this realistically get off the ground now or in the past? Do you think if the groundwork for this were laid in the 90s when the World Cup was in the United States the first time, do you think that if this was the plan, that if it was taken seriously, because that's part of the article, was how seriously was this multi-tiered pro-rel setup really taken back then?
Yeah.
But if this was the blueprint from day one in the 90s, would we be living in this right now?
I think it's really hard to imagine. If you read the quotes in Pablo's piece, Galati and Rothenberg both said, yeah, we didn't really consider this. We didn't really consider Fricker's idea. It was all kind of just dreaming about it, a thought experiment. It's what every American soccer fan has done at some point in their path of fandom. What if, right? Dreaming about what a promotion relegation system could look like. We've all had in our heads our own ideas. In fact, I have in our morning kick around inbox, and I think maybe a couple other places, I have entire manifestos about promotion and relegation in America from people that are a little more than fans. Now, they became writers because they cared about this so much. Obviously, we have had people that have been executives in American soccer like Peter Wilt write their manifestos or write their ideas for how to make this work. I don't know that he was drilling down to details like 4 regions of 12 teams, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the even more interesting than maybe trying to make 4 regions of 12 teams each for a second division in Werner Ficker's plan is the detail that they wanted to have a third division that would have 96 teams across the country. And in fact, this is the image that Pablo included in his story. This is apparently how those regions would be organized for the third division. So you've got a Western division with Idaho included. You've got a sort of Northern Plains division there with Montana and Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas. You've got, I guess you would call that a Southwest region there with the 4 corner states. You've got Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma together, the Southeast. What's interesting is when you look at this, like the A region makes sense. The C region makes sense. The B region is too big because there are more teams maybe even now than you would, there are too many teams in that part of the country. You would have to split off a couple states and throw them into a different region because there's just so much soccer happening in the Southeast. That sort of Midwest, I guess that's the West Midwest. You tell me, Robert. You're a Midwesterner because Michigan.
You
gets
keep throwing
lumped
me
in.
under the bus like I know something about Nebraska and Minnesota. I'm like 4 states to the east of that.
I'm talking about the D region here, which
okay, the Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa.
Yes, Missouri, Minnesota, Iowa. Yeah, that's interesting.
Those specific regions aside, looking at this map, this kind of looks now what the semi-pro or the summer amateur league sort of structure looks like. There's way more than between USL2, UPSL, NPSL. There's way more than that. So this part of the scheme, in a way, if you squint your eyes a little bit, this is kind of essentially what we have at this level.
What I don't know. So the thing about this, though, what's interesting is that according to Pablo's reading of this, in the second and third tiers of the pyramid, only 24 of the 144 teams would be professional. So even Werner Fricker, as ambitious as this idea wasn't imagining a connected system with 3 tiers with a lot of pro teams. He was imagining a lot of amateur teams who I guess then would have to go pro as they moved up. It says, it's also worth noting that until the envisioned goal of 32 first and 12 second division teams was met, any ownership group could buy its way into the first division. Only after both leagues were at full capacity would promotion and relegation commence. And I guess if you tried to apply this now, we'd be there, right? I mean, we'd be there with the first and second division at the very least.
Oh, yeah.
At the very least. And then we'd be talking about what does that third division look like. And now we have a country that, and again, 96 teams is a massive third division. And he's not really talking about one league, right? He's talking about all of these regions, the 8 regions on this map, and that being 8 leagues essentially. And obviously part of that is you limit travel costs, right? And that is a major part of what we're talking about with why professional soccer is really tough to make work in America, is because everything is really hard to get to, right? So I don't know. It's a fascinating idea. I can't say I wish it would have happened because I do think it probably was impossible. And I don't know that it would have lasted if you tried to apply it. And then you start over again. You hit reset consistently. But at the same time, it was U.S. Soccer, who has no power to do this. They have no power to dictate the the structure of American soccer. And Galati says as much in the interview, or in the piece with Pablo Maurer. But it was U.S. Soccer at least envisioning something that might work in a giant country with all of this possibility, but no clear way to get there. And now what we have instead is a bunch of leagues sort of fighting each other. Like you even mentioned the short season summer amateur leagues, Rob, and how many of those are out there and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
UPSL, NPSL, and these are all doing their own thing. UPSL does 2 tournaments a year, fall and spring, and those teams play they also play in their local high amateur leagues, men's leagues. Then you've got the NPSL, and USL League 2 is still out there doing the same sort of developmental summer program. So there's Oakland County is a good example of that. So it is it's complicated.
We shall see how this plays out, but interesting to dust off the old soccer time machine. The one thing, if this was implemented, I feel like the Richmond or the team the team would in the Northeast that won the Open Cup back in the day would still be called the Raging Rhinos. I feel like there would be a little bit more of an opportunity for the Raging Rhinos to still exist if the old school plan came to be.
If you want to do time machine and alternate history, and your dog is going crazy for this story, I just want to point that out. But
yeah,
if you
the
did that,
mailman time.
Rochester would be an MLS town, and there is a history. There's a story there. Rochester was this close to being an MLS town. Almost happened.
Throw your opinions and takes on the dusty old plan for Pro Rel to USA. Throw it in the comments and join the conversation. Answer a non-related question in the chat. If I am unable or unwilling to match Jason and Jeremiah's beard game, I would say both, actually. I'm the son of a bearded man, and this thing would come in pretty patchy, and it takes a certain type of person to have a graying facial hair before they can grow a full set of facial hairs. But hey, thanks for the inquiry, but go check out Jason's second part of his interview with Jeremiah Oshan on the Coffee. Coffee.com/morningkickaround is where you can help donate to the show and gain access to exclusive segments over there. I think this will be the third bonus segment for Morning Kick Around on the Coffee. Also, we are watching those YouTube subscriber numbers kick up. I'll keep a number of where we're at today and see where we can get to. I think we should get some sort of reward to subscribers if we hit 2,000. We got to brainstorm some motivation to get the clicking on the subscribe button.
I'm not going to give you my copy of Watchmen, but I keep thinking that I'm going to start giving some stuff away. You can see just a small selection of the things I have in my studio here in my home in Northern Virginia. I'm looking at scarves. I'm looking at a Nashville, not the MLS team, the Nashville Soccer Club flag, the USL version. I'm looking at a Jacksonville flag. Jerseys I probably won't give you, but I do have a lot of stuff here. In fact, I went to the SiriusXM studios yesterday because they turned my power off for some work they had to do. And while I was there, I realized there were a lot of things lying around that nobody really wants. So here's a thing that I picked up while I was there, Robert. You tell me what you make of this. Can you see what that is?
Oh, is that the one season wonder in Chicago?
This is the terrible logo everybody hated that they dumped after one season.
Did it make the full
Fire.
season? Did it make it through the full season?
I don't think it did. And this is wild. I have a 2001 FA Premier called the FA Premier League. It is a sticker book.
I was just going to ask if that was a sticker book. That's a good one. That's a beaut.
Look at those faces. Look at those baby faces there. Can you identify every one of those figures?
Michael Owen is an easy one. Is that a very fresh faced David Beckham in the middle?
I believe it is. A bald, shaved head David Beckham. Who else you got there?
Is Thierry Henry?
Yes.
Is that Zola in the West Ham?
I believe that is Zola. Yes, absolutely.
And then on the right-hand side, Chelsea in the old schools. I'm having a harder time with that one, to be honest.
Maybe somebody in the chat can help us out with
that. Not Emil Heskey.
I didn't go back and look. No, did Emil Heskey play for Chelsea? I remember him with Villa, but
he bounced around a little bit. But I'm trying to think of 2001 who would be, a magazine.
I bet I can't really look at myself and hold this up, but look at these logos. So you were talking about Chelsea with the old school. Can you see? Let me move it this way.
Yeah, that's a good look.
Chelsea's there on Chelsea's right there. I don't know if you can see Chelsea that well, but Chelsea was the old school logo. You're like, what? Jimmy Floyd Hasselbeck. That's who that is. Floyd
good
Hasselbeck.
Shout. That was much. Yeah.
Thank you very much to Nicholas Murray, who has the knowledge and brings it to the table.
Yeah, I didn't have too much conviction in that previous guest, but thank you for filling that up. But that's always a blast from the past. And I love that there was an Ipswich logo on there. And Ipswich obviously going to get relegated.
Man, listen, Coventry City was in the top division. Derby County was in the top division. Ipswich at the time, obviously they are now. Leeds, a couple years before the crash and before they were dumped from the first division and took forever to
That
get
might be
back.
their pomp right there.
I mean, Middlesbrough. Remember Middlesbrough as a Sunderland was in the first division at the time. Bradford City was in the first division in 2001. Insane.
That's a wild take. And I love the stat that Ipswich actually has a winning record against Manchester City in the top flight, which I thought was a hilarious stat. But that's a rabbit hole to go down another day. Wednesday's morning has been kicked, and we will see you again Friday, 9:30 Eastern, right here on Morning Kick Around on YouTube. And until then, everybody, enjoy your soccer.